self-governing offices in Washington, D.C., New Mexico, California, and Alaska. Sonos continues later.
Live from the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, Illinois, this is Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. It is the last day of the DNC, with a host of speakers and entertainers building excitement among delegates and closing out with Vice President Kamala Harris delivering her nomination acceptance speech. As many of the speakers at this convention have stated, Harris faces a stiff election fight. But if she is successful, what might her administration deliver for Native Americans? And how might her leadership on important issues differ from the alternative? We know that Native voters are more apt to support Democrats, but outside of the top issues we've heard about this week, abortion rights, support for unions and middle-class Americans, what can we as Native people take away from this week and the remaining 75 days before the election? Join today's discussion by calling 1-800-996-2848. That's also 1-800-99-NATIVE. Let's now meet our guest today. Seated next to me on my left is Chris Roberts. He is the mayor of the city of Shoreline, Washington, and a member of the Credentials Committee for the Washington delegation. He's also a citizen of the Choctaw Nation. Mayor Roberts, welcome to Native America Calling.
Halito.
Halito. Also joining us today is Robert Miguel. He is the chairman of the Ak-Chin Indian community located in Arizona. Chairman Miguel, welcome to Native America Calling.
Thank you for having me here.
Pleasure to have you both. And of course, joining us also is Sean Griswold, our correspondent for the convention, and he is with Source, New Mexico as well. Sean, welcome back.
And Sean, Keshi.
Well, this is an interesting day here. It is day 4. We're going to wrap up here, of course, but we've got a lot to talk about. And Mayor Roberts, I want to start with you here. We've heard a lot this week about what a Harris presidency might look like for a large swath of Americans. But we haven't heard much mention of Native Americans or tribes from primetime DNC speakers. And that's where people are really watching. You got all the networks covering the convention. So let's start today's conversation with the question, how knowledgeable are Vice President Kamala Harris and Governor Tim Walz on Native issues and communities, and where are they getting their information about Native people? I mean, Peggy Flanagan is obviously a resource, but Indian country is much larger than the state of Minnesota and the upper Midwest.
Well, I would say that Vice President Harris and Governor Walz are very in tune with the needs of Indian country. The Vice President working with the Biden administration, having annual tribal summits, so meeting with the leaders in Indian country. That is an important source of information and resource for her and what will be her administration. And then Governor Walz was affectionately described as an uncle yesterday at the Native American Caucus meeting for all his work in supporting the tribal members within the state of Minnesota.
Uncle, football coach, veteran, the list just goes on and on with titles for Governor Walz. Well, what do you think? I mean, what can we expect for Native American policy under a Harris administration? Will it be a continuation of what we've seen with the Biden administration, or could there be major changes?
I believe it will be largely a continuation of what the Biden administration is doing. I think that Harris is going to continue to develop and strengthen government-to-government relationships with tribal nations. And I'm really excited about her commitment to building housing across the country. And I think that, as we know, that we have a lot of a disproportionate amount of Native Americans who are experiencing homelessness, and so if we can build more housing, we can get people housed. I think that will do a lot for not only tribal members but all Americans across the country.
Now, who are some new names that we could see heading up federal departments and programs that impact Native people if Kamala Harris is elected?
I do not know that answer, but I will say that I will be very excited with Governor Flanagan.
All right. What do you think, Sean? Who could be some possible picks here going forward?
Going forward, I mean, that's going to be the exciting part, to understand the platform, and I'm glad that we have people here who are going to be part of the organization around that, if that what occurs. And so, I mean, it could be any of these two individuals who are part of the federal structure. It doesn't just have to be secretaries. It doesn't just have to be department heads, but it layers down to every single individual that's going to have a functioning role in the government. And I imagine we're going to see a lot more Native people in that going forward.
All right. Mayor, now your city, it's about 60,000 people. You're north of Seattle. Do you have a significant urban Native population in Shoreline? And if so, how crucial is it for Harris to also understand the issues impacting Native people who don't reside on tribal lands and advance policies that suit their needs?
We have a decent population of natives who live in Shoreline and in King County. Many of the tribal members who live in King County, I mean, they go to the Seattle Indian Health Board. They use tribal services to get health care, to get just sort of basic supply. I mean, just sort of basic to get their basic needs met. And so, yes, I mean, the urban Indian population needs to be sort of, I believe, needs to be prioritized in the Harris administration to make sure that the obligation that the federal government has to tribal members across the country are met.
All right, right. Well, let's talk more about IHS funding. It did see a bit of a boost under the Biden administration, but it's still well below what advocates say is sufficient. And does a Harris administration fix that, perhaps with a push to earmark all federal funding for Native American programs as entitlements as opposed to discretionary? Because I talk to a lot of people who say that's one of the biggest problems facing the application of federal programs, how those dollars are earmarked.
You know, I think that's a question that I would like to hear from people here on the ground. Like, how do you and the communities you work with, who have to work with the federal delegations, the federal interest, the federal agencies, as a government-to-government relationship, what is that like for you when you have to go and ask, annually each year for money for your services that can get people fed, health care, and in schools? Can you describe that process for us? And what you get from the leadership that are out there?
I'll tell you what, it's just going back, taking a step back, and I want to go back to that question you asked before I answer this one. Is as far as the Harris administration, how would that benefit the tribes? Are we looking at that as an enhancement? Is it going to get better? I believe so, and a lot of it has to do, for the past couple of decades. We've seen Native Americans actually, again, being selected for positions in various cabinets as we move forward. So that helps a lot there. I mean, again, it strengthens that relationship, obviously, because when you have tribal leaders within the government in positions, they're going to understand us more than anything. So they're going to understand what we need and what we're all about. And again, so I see that, with the Harris administration coming in, possibly, that we're going to see more things, maybe take another level, take another step forward in providing us services overall, and I'm excited about that. So, but as far as the relationship with healthcare and all these, IHS and whatnot, I mean, again, it's a matter of just sitting there and understanding one another and what our needs are. And a lot of these things have come not only in having meetings and just being, again, assertive and vocal about, our position, and obviously we're behind, and how do we catch up? But a lot of these agencies, these employees with the government, they come to our communities and they see firsthand what we need, and so that really, really helps when they have that kind of a relationship. But again, I'm just excited overall about the possibilities and the potentials of again, really taking us to the level where we should be. I mean, it's trying. It's been, as we know, for the past decades, it's, we're probably never going to catch up to where we should be as far as assistance from the federal government. But, again, it's making strides. We're getting there. We'll probably never fully be there, but we are much further along than what we've been. And, obviously, a Democratic, the party had been supportive of natives for so long. We've seen it with the Obama administration, skipped with the Trump administration, but, with the Biden administration and now potentially the Harris administration, we can see a lot of these things coming to fruition, and, we get excited. But it's a long process. There's still a lot of work to be done. But, again, that relationship is we're closing the gap in a sense. So we're optimistic and excited about that.
Chairman Miguel, let's talk about water rights, because that's a very important issue there. You folks are located in Arizona. You're south of Phoenix. Of course, we all are familiar with the droughts and the challenges of water access there for communities in Arizona. And, do you see a difference with the way Democratic and Republican administrations handle water rights in the Southwest?
Yes, I do. I mean, obviously, as I mentioned, the Democratic Party have been very, sensitive and attentive to our needs and, the water rights. I don't know if you know, but the Occitan Indian community, we do have a water settlement, the first of its kind, the only of its kind, where we've, thankful to our former leaders that, went out and lobbied our efforts and got us our water settlement there in Arizona. We were created back in 1912 by executive order, given 40,000 plus acres of land, and within 6 months they reduced us to 22,000 because local farmers at that time were lobbying to the government that they gave us too much land and we weren't going to be successful. And we were farmers. We're farmers. 22,000 acre tribe, 16,000 designated agriculture. So we're a farming community. So obviously, water is a priority. It's our lifeline, our bloodline. And so, we have a water settlement at this time that's really secure and really can't be touched. So again, we see the drought coming, and it's been going on, for years now, and so we're in a sense safe as far as that. But we look at the other tribes there and the farming communities. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's just not about tribes, but it's the whole area there. So water is the top priority there, and right now, I was one of 3 tribal leaders that was selected by the Governor Hobbs, to sit on a water policy council to help, mitigate and try to see what we could do as far as helping everybody, not just tribes, but everybody out within the area. So there is that, and it's a Democratic administration there in Arizona. So again, we're working together, and again, we're doing what we can. And so it's very, very helpful that you have an administration that will sit down and listen rather than take.
Okay. Chairman Robert Miguel and Mayor Chris Roberts, thanks for kicking off our discussion here live at the United Center at Day 4 of the DNC. We're going to be right back, folks. Stay with us.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay. 2 minutes.
Cool.
Most people think great God will come from the sky, take away everything.
Thanks for tuning in to Native America Calling. I am Sean Spruce, and we are live at the Democratic National Convention. We're also envisioning a Kamala Harris presidency and how that might benefit or hurt Native families and Native nations. You can share your comments and questions by calling 1-800-996-2848 or just 1-800-99-NATIVE. And of course, this show today is being live streamed, so check it out on Facebook Live, our Native America Calling Facebook page, or our NV1 YouTube channel, and you can check us out on video as well as audio today. So glad you're here along for the ride with us here at the DNC. I'm going to go ahead and introduce another guest who just joined us. She made it over to our booth here in Media Row. Her name is Gabriella Cázares-Kelly, and she is the Pima County recorder and also a member of the Tohono O'odham Nation. She's been on our show before. Gabriella, welcome back to NAC.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. Well, just so much going on. We ran into each other just the other day. I was bugging through the mezzanine. There were all kinds of people. I said, hey, there's a Native woman over there. I'm going to say hello. And we kind of buddied up and took some selfies. It's been a fun time.
It's been so great to be in community with so many Natives here. It's actually been, the Native representation here has been really visible, and I'm loving it. I'm loving everything.
All right. Well, the last time you were on our show wasn't too long ago, and we talked about improving Native access to polls in Pima County, Arizona. Is this still an issue in your home state? And are there any political races that are hinging on Native voters having fair access to the polls?
I think first of all, every race is hinging on this. Everything that we're seeing right now, we saw it in 2020 with Native voter turnout in Arizona in particular. Arizona is a purple state on the verge of turning blue. I think if Democrats are wanting to win, we need the Native community to come out and vote. And I as far as accessibility, that's something that I work on really closely in my role as the county recorder. We're trying to make it easier for people to understand what their options are. In Arizona, we have 27 days of early voting. It's amazing. As I've been hanging out here at the DNC, I've been talking with so many other people from other states, and they're like, we get 12. We only get 12 days of early voting. You have 27? How does that work? And, so we talk about no excuse vote by mail, which is an amazing thing. It's an amazing service, and even with the rural mail service being slow sometimes, it's still 27 days. And I think it's also, with our Native active military, that's also, people need to know that they can vote from anywhere, not only in the state, but also anywhere in the country or abroad. We could send a ballot to a submarine. Arizona has sent a ballot to space before, not my county, but I like to think that if there's somebody out there, we're going to be able to help them out.
There's someone on the space station who needed to vote. That's awesome. Well, let's talk about one Arizona Senate candidate, Kari Lake. And her campaign is based on what hey, this is public radio. We got to give everybody an even voice here. Okay. Her campaign is based on what she claims is election fraud, of course. And what do you think there? How do those claims have an effect on how voters view election integrity in Arizona?
When Kari Lake tweets anything having to do with malicious intention from my office, my phones start blowing up. And one of the main things that we've actually been having to talk about this recently of how are we supporting our staff members who are on the receiving end of hateful comments and racism. I've had people talking to my staff and saying, oh, are you the diversity hire? I've had another one say, I don't talk to Mexicans, and hang up on the staff member. And my staff member is emotionally impacted by that. You don't get to have somebody say that to you and just okay, let me take the next call. Let me just, and the high level of service that my staff in particular exudes in the job, in the role. I mean, they take it so seriously. We are so dedicated to helping every single voter, even the racist voters. It's heartbreaking, but we have talked about what are the tactics? What are the support? We need to tell staff if you are having a moment, you can transfer that call to the supervisor. You can give them a warning. We've had to write out scripts of what they can say. They can take a walk.
Well, what about an
Terrible.
election day? I mean, if somebody comes to the polls and they've got a bad attitude and they're spewing just a lot of weird rhetoric, do you reserve the right to turn them away?
This is really complicated. That's a really complicated thing. It would have to get really extreme for that situation to happen. If somebody is elevating, we have a number of techniques. And my office doesn't oversee election day, but we do early voting sites. And so the same thing happens there if people start to get elevated. And usually, honestly, it's when they encounter a problem. And so if they're being issued a provisional ballot, that's usually when they're going to freak out. And that's, people need to know that provisional ballots are actually a safety for the voter. It is a fail-safe method so that it gives us time to investigate their voter registration if there was a change. And so it's actually a protection for them. But people think that they're being discriminated against when they're told that they have to take one. So we train our people, my staff, and then the elections department trains their staff to, de-escalate. We're never going to deny somebody a ballot, but we are now training people when it's time to call 911.
Okay.
Like that is something that we're having to have conversations about because of the heightened whatever it is.
All right.
Yeah.
The tension, the turmoil,
tension,
the disruption. Yeah. Chris, how about you? Election access issues in Washington, and how could a Harris presidency alleviate some of those challenges, specifically for Native voters?
Well, fortunately in Washington, we have all vote by mail. So we do have a couple voting sites for people who are
People on space stations can.
No, but for people, we do have a couple of sites across the county for people who need extra assistance. So someone who might be visually impaired or just need someone to help translate the ballot. So we do have a couple. In Washington, we do have sites like that. But one of the nice things about Washington State is that we have a system of drop boxes all throughout the state. I think every college campus has a voter drop box so people can drop their ballot off. We have within Shoreline, there's two drop boxes, one at the library and one at one of the park and rides. So, I mean, places where people go, there's opportunities to sort of drop that ballot off, and over 50-60% of all ballots are returned at a drop box. And then also in Washington, it's prepaid postage, so you don't even have to. There's not even that burden on the voter.
All right. Chairman Miguel, let's talk a little bit more about Kari Lake and specifically her role going forward in terms of water access. And I know there have been some issues there with regard to her and Ruben Gallego, and maybe you could kind of walk our listeners through some of those challenges and what that could mean going forward if a new administration comes into the White House.
Well, I'll tell you, Kari Lake actually, excuse me, she actually, before she really moved forward in her administration, or what she ran for governor, obviously for the state of Arizona, and lost to Governor Katie Hobbs. And she did reach out to our community, and it was a time of still the COVID era, and so we had a Zoom WebEx with her, and so we didn't know what party she was, and and she didn't reveal any of that. I think she just wanted to get acquainted and get a feel for the tribes overall. So we were able to do that with her, but then we had found her party and what her views were, and obviously different from what we were as Democrats looking at and whatnot. And so that was probably the last time in my experience with our tribe, as far as her reaching out and meeting with tribes and getting more familiar. And I haven't, I have great relationships, obviously, with other 21 tribes in Arizona. There's 22. And we, during that time, I never heard back from the other tribes as far as Carrie Lake coming out to visit or wanting to know more about respective tribes. So it was kind of lost after that first time. So we never really got to know her and again know what her views were and her opinion, only what we saw on television and how she obviously was supported by President Trump at that time. And so, just as far as tribes anyways, I believe she did not, really indulge and really get a lot of relationships with tribes, but Congressman Gallego, who is running against her for senator, has been very supportive, and this was even before I've known Congressman Gallego for 11 years now, and prior to that he was always reaching out to our tribes. This was way before he was thinking about running for senator. And so that relationship was always there. He would come out personally to our community and visit, and not just our community, but other tribes overall in Arizona. So it was not a matter of campaigning, none of that stuff. He was just sincere and really wanted to understand and know about our communities. And he got to know us very well. And obviously we do support him, and because he understands our issues. He sees it firsthand, what we're talking about. So he's like the boots on the ground. I want to see, I want to know. And I'm not doing it just to get votes, because again, he was doing this years ago before anything ever really happened. So, I know we're talking about Arizona, but what I really want to point out is, Governor Walz. I met him in February, and it was really neat because Governor Hobbs' administration, when she came into office, she created a cabinet, the first cabinet ever, of to work with tribes, and so it was great because again it showed her commitment to tribes and working with us. And so Governor Hobbs reached out to myself and Governor Stephen Lewis Rowe from the Gila River community and asked, hey, would you guys be willing to meet with Governor Walz from Minnesota? This was back in February, way before all of this happened, and we were like, what was the onus on wanting to meet with us? Well, he wants to administer a cabinet within his administration in Minnesota because he has tribes in Minnesota, and he wanted to strengthen that effort and that commitment to the tribes there because they are people just like everybody else. So we met with him. Great guy, I'll tell you what. It was a great guy, great conversation. We went with him for about an hour, and we talked about our relationship with the Arizona administration, with Governor Hobbs, and how we're all working together to do what we can for each other. And so fast forward, when it was announced by Vice President Harris that was going to be her running mate, me and Governor Lewis texted each other right away. It was like, did we just meet with Governor Walz in February? And then come to realize, wow, we did meet with him. And, genuine guy. He was just down to earth like you saw last night when he was when he said his speech.
Well, that's interesting because, Senator Mark Kelly from Arizona, his name was thrown around as a potential VP pick. And sounds like you're happy with Walz, though.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And Senator Kelly, another one, prior to him running for office, when he began, he actually went to the tribes, actually the Intertribal Council of Arizona, which I sit on as the vice president. Senator Kelly's team reached out to me and said, hey, can you introduce Senator Kelly to ITCA at a meeting? So we made that happen. I was able to actually introduce him to the group as Senator Kelly. And so we have that relationship. But, I think anybody that they would have picked would have been of the group would have been great. Obviously, we were supportive of Senator Kelly because he's coming from Arizona. But I'll tell you what, that Walz, the pick was also, I'll tell you what, it's, from that time he was selected to what he's doing now, from last night's speech and everything like that. It's just, I'll tell you what, it's a winning combination, and we're excited because we know, again, him coming out just to find out about the administration Governor Hobbs had with tribes was special, and we love that.
Yeah, well, hey, I want to thank you for bringing it back to Arizona because I have a question about some reporting we got from Paulie Denetclaw, who works with ICT News, and they were at the Native Caucus, and they were talking about Jonathan Nez. And so I'm actually curious to both of your positions on this because while Nez may have an uphill climb to winning that race, he could still bring in Native voters that are going to be voting statewide on the Carrie Lake race, on all the other stuff happening statewide. So while he may not win his race, is there strategy involved in bringing Native people to help the whole overall ticket for the Democratic Party?
Go ahead.
The answer is yes. The answer is definitely
You're telling me yes?
yes.
Okay.
Because so I mean, at the statewide level, a vote in a red district is the same as a vote in a blue district.
Okay.
And so the more votes that Jonathan Nez can get in his district, the more votes that our Democratic candidate in Oklahoma who's running, a tribal member who's running, that's a vote for votes for him are going to be a vote for Vice President Harris. That's going to be a vote for the Senate candidates. I mean, so you're going to get, and then you have volunteers who go out and help these candidates. And so that's going to bring more people to the polls, get more people excited about this election, because this election matters to us as individuals. It's not just about what's happening with the administration, but these elections are our opportunities to say what we want from our elected officials and to hold our elected officials accountable.
Yeah.
Another really cool thing that happens with that too is it plants seeds. It means that Native people will be working on campaigns. They'll learn how to knock doors. They'll learn how to phone bank, and then they'll know this language of running a campaign, whether they win or lose. It helps bring them in this together, and that could have future projections, which I think is really important. And I think that anyone has a shot in Arizona. I mean, especially with the whirlwind we've been on in these past couple of weeks people have renewed interest in this election because of the change up in caste. And then, as far as Walz goes, he did come to the Native American Caucus, and he was talking like he's been to all the powwows and the fairs and hanging out. You could tell he had a real ease.
Is it sincere though?
No,
it's sincere.
no, it was so. It was so.
Okay.
Yeah, and he's really close friends with Peggy Flanagan.
Okay.
He's Lieutenant Governor Flanagan, and he convinced her to run with him. He sought her out and brought her into the fold, and they've been friends for 20 years. And so, of course she's brought him into the, all of that.
I'm sorry, we got to take a quick break. We're going to come right back. We're going to continue this dialogue. We got a lot to talk about, folks.
Program support by the Colorado
Okay, who wants to
Foundation,
jump
the
into this?
Native-led
Who's got
Foundation
just a
supporting native-led initiatives
you want to
protecting the lands, waters, and cultures of the plateau for generations to come. The Colorado Plateau Foundation helps to build networks, community, and organizational capacity.
We're glad you're listening to Native America Calling. I'm your host today, Sean Spruce. Do you look forward to a Kamala Harris presidency? Or does that possibility worry you? What do you think it means for Native people? Call in and tell us what candidate or issue you're most focused on as we head into the home stretch of the 2024 campaign. Let's get some calls going. We had some great calls yesterday from some folks who don't always call into the show. They had some really hot takes. We'd like to get some more going. 1-800-996-2848. 1-800-996-2848. Just grab that smartphone. Just tap those numbers. 1-800-996-2848. We'll get your calls. We'll get your comments on the air. And, Sean, you've got a burning question.
Yeah, I'm just curious for everybody here on the panel or anybody who's calling or listening who wants to call in, this view on how we've seen local races and the primaries impacted by down-ballot races locally. You're seeing a lot of progressive and Democratic politics win over, and even in primaries with Republicans, some of the MAGA principles are losing as well. But my thought, what I'm curious to understand is there any up-ballot effect that the local races, the organizing happening on those politics, on progressive and Democratic politics, that can help the Harris ticket and ultimately hold it accountable if it actually leads it to a victory?
I think I think local candidates is everything, and not just because I am a local candidate. That's really when we're talking about local, we're talking about things that impact people on their everyday. Like it might be a road, it might be there's school lunch program that the school board picks, or the way that they vote. Right? In my case, in Arizona and Pima County, we saw. Besides Ruben Gallego, who had a multi-million-dollar campaign, I was the second highest vote getter of all of Pima County. And what that says to me is that so many people went and passed other candidates down looking for my name in particular, and chose that above others. And what that means is there are people that are coming out to vote for me that otherwise maybe not would be voting, and we saw that in 2020 as well. I actually beat out Joe Biden in a couple of precincts, so it was kind of fun to look at the data afterward. Yeah. But people like me, people like brown people of color, progressive, we're able to talk and reach community that maybe has never felt inspired to participate before, in a way that it impacts the entire race overall. So it helps them. Since I'm here voting for Gabriella, I'm going to also vote for whoever's at the top of the ticket.
And you're describing true power, community power. If people are voting for you over the president, that means you have a coalition of people that are now expecting you to be accountable to the whole thing. So how do you actively, as a candidate and elected, however you want to describe this, hold the powerful accountable for the community that's voting for you and wants you there?
I've really been struggling with this a lot. Actually, I've been going through some training programs, especially for women of color and women of color electeds, talking about power and the neutrality of power. Power is, I think about power and immediately we think that it's evil. But power isn't. It's what people do with that power. And so I'm always going to be held accountable by my community. At the end of the day, when I don't have a title, the Tohono O'odham Nation, they are going to hold me accountable. I've already, I'm gonna be Gabby, to my homage for the rest of my life, and they're going to know me for that, not my title. And so I think that is the power of local candidates, people who are in your own community. The faces of the people that you're serving, and I think that is super important. And I think it builds a really huge community of trust. I know that there have been a ton of people who have been very interested in the happenings here. They're following me on social media, wanting to know what's happening every day at the convention, and they never cared before. They're just what? I don't know what this is.
And the possibility of a Harris presidency, which would put a woman of color in the White House, that's just going to build to that momentum that you're describing.
It's huge. It's huge because when we think about a singular woman, we don't travel by ourselves. we bring our community with us. And we've already seen that happen, with Auntie Deb Haaland up in the Secretary of Interior. Like, she is appointing other Indigenous people in important roles, and we're seeing others get pulled into the mix. Like I said about the visibility, here we had Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan up on stage, not just one time like, oh, look at the Indian for the photo. Like, she was conducting business here at the Democratic National Convention. She was on TV like 3 different times with a microphone in front of her. That's powerful.
Okay.
That's really huge.
Okay,
What Harris is going to bring is the fact that there's going to be so many people who say that I can be that. I can be the next president. I can be the next auditor. I can be the next mayor. I can be the next city council member. I can be the next school board member. I can do that because there's someone who looks like me who's in that office that I respect, that's doing a good job. And that's the important thing. Going back to sort of elections and holding people accountable, one of the things that I think we need to do as a Indian community in the United States is develop the next generation of leaders. And to build that next generation of leaders, we need to get people elected to school board, to get people elected to city council, to get people elected to a utility commission, if that's what is in your state. If we have those people, then they can, if they're doing a good job and they're respected, and we know tribal members will do the work, but they will then be sort of seen as, okay, maybe you should run for state legislature. Maybe you should run for Congress. Maybe you're in a position of visibility where you can be tapped by Secretary Haaland or by the president to serve as within the administration. And so it's bringing that visibility. Right now, as we learned in the Native American Caucus, there's only like about 280 tribal members who are serving in office right now. That's a small drop in the bucket. And so we need to get people to run and to serve these positions so that we can have the next generation of important tribal leaders. And one day we will see a tribal member serving as president of the United States.
All right. Well, we're going to bring another guest into the conversation here. We're going to get things switched over. But before we do that, while we make that transition, we need to also acknowledge the fact that there's no guarantee that Kamala Harris is going to win, right? And what does a Trump presidency look like in these issues we're talking about today, with voter access, with the momentum we're talking about? How does that change the narrative, and what's the game plan for that?
What's interesting here is that I think we're going to have to deal with the elements of Sean, you're going to have to talk. I can.
Okay.
Go ahead. Keep talking.
All right. Yeah, I'm just curious. And I'd love to get a call going. I'd love to get some calls going here. We still have time. We can take some callers. 1-800-996-2848. 1-800-99-NATIVE. You can give us a call. You can share your comments. And with that, we've got another guest here who just joined us in the nick of time. I want to welcome Xochitl Torres-Small. And wonderful to have her on the show. She was a United States representative for the 5th largest district in the country. She is the first woman and first person of color to represent New Mexico's 2nd congressional district. Welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much. It is surreal to get to be on this show. I listen to it in the car whenever I'm home in New Mexico, and it's just a joy to get to be part of this and part of the work that you do.
I'm glad you found us here at Media Row. It's a little bit tricky sometimes to find us back here in the atrium, but pleasure to have you.
And shout out to my husband if he's listening to Native American.
What's his name?
Nathan.
All right, Nathan. Shout out.
Hey, thanks for coming here and bringing us a question. I think what we're trying to hopefully understand here, and what our conversation was a lot about here, was about the energy and the excitement around the event and the campaign. We know that vibes are essential to winning elections, but from your experience and what can you share, do vibes lead to legislation?
Being here, vibes are important, and it's more than vibes. It's about the excitement. It's about continuing to invest in Indian country. And it's something that I certainly saw the need for when I represented New Mexico's 2nd Congressional District. Before the pandemic, I was hearing about all sorts of challenges, whether it's, seeing people have to haul their water, whether it's the challenges when it comes to high-speed internet. And then COVID hit, and Indian country was left behind. And, whether it was Alamo Nation, where kids were outside of their health center trying to do their homework, or whether it was making sure food was delivered, and that we were also respecting tribal sovereignty when it comes to folks coming in or being able to keep people safe who were on the reservations. And so that's why it's so important that the investment in infrastructure that we're seeing right now, whether it's the $13 billion of set aside specifically for tribal nations, or it's the $60 billion for high-speed internet, which is available to tribes, and $2 billion as a set aside specifically for tribes.
And for tribal nations, from your experience, what can you share that are going to be some of the hurdles and some of the issues, and maybe some of the places that begin to grow with in terms of being part and active in the new agenda, in a new administration, excuse me?
I think it's really, representation matters, and getting to see, making sure people are stepping up and sharing their challenges, and also participating in consultations, right? So every time the Department of Commerce puts out something, or the Department of the Interior puts out something about a new rule, being able to, one, demand that consultation, because that is their right as government to government, but two, participating robustly and thinking about how what the government does going to impact your community.
Okay, well, yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Do you have any thoughts or any ideas about that?
Well, you know what? We've got a caller on the line right now. Michael, listening in Jemez Pueblo, New Mexico. He tunes in on station KUNM. Hello, Michael. I'm so glad you called in. How you doing?
Oh, fine and dandy. Yeah, you're really covering the whole gamut of both parties. I've been a city employee for many, many years, and just watching and observing how governments work, I think the best way that I've seen that organizations have is to get people in both camps, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, because you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. Say Trump wins, then all your eggs are in Harris's basket. It's going to be hard to get your issues and your whatever you want done. But if you have someone in there that's working with them, even if Trump loses, there's people still in there that can say they win the House or say they win the Senate. At least you have people in there that can lobby and get some of the legislation done. It's like when Trump won his first presidency. In the Albuquerque Journal newspaper, you saw in the background natives for Trump, and they were wearing these war bonnets or the feather bonnets behind them. It was a grandiose picture. So that's the first thing I thought of. I said, what are they going to get done for their constituents by being in that camp?
Michael, we really appreciate you calling in. Always a pleasure when you're a caller here on Native America Calling. He joins us from Jemez Pueblo, and he listens on KUNM in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Zoshi, you want to respond?
I sure will. And Michael, it's so good to hear your voice. Thank you for being part of democracy. That is what matters, and it is so important. And one of the things, I didn't get to serve with Tim Walz when he was in Congress, but what I hear across the board is that he is collaborative, he is bipartisan, and knowing that he's willing to work with folks, I think, is really important as you think about who you're voting for, wanting to make sure it's people who care about representing everyone and not just the people who are on their side.
Now, how long have you been? Have you been here for the whole convention? When did you get here? When you taking off?
I've been here since Monday and headed out early tomorrow morning.
All right, so you'll be here for the big finale tonight, and the concert, and the balloons, everything.
It is so exciting to feel this joy and to feel that it is there for everyone, that we recognize there is a whole lot of work to do. There are real promises to deliver on, and there's excitement to get that done.
All right. Well, Chairman Miguel, I want to go back to you. I know you've got some thoughts here. We've got about a minute and a half before we have to wrap up the show. I'm going to give you the final word.
Okay. I'll tell you what. It's we've always talked about how important every single vote counts, and it does. We got to go out there and vote and put our party across. 574 recognized federally recognized tribe here in Arizona. We got to make sure from the smallest tribe to the biggest tribe that we get the voter support out there and get our party across. Is really, really important. Again, I mentioned about the administration and how supportive they have been in Indian country. And every time I go to lobby our efforts in D.C., my conversation's always, congressmen, senators, I'm here with you today, and I have the capability of being here. But don't forget about those tribes that don't have the resources to be here. I don't speak on their speak for them, but I advocate as much as I can for our leaders to go out and see them, because they need you just as much as we do. So again, please, and again, the Democratic Party is a favorable administration for Indian country, and that's why we support our Democrat. And it's good to see my good friend Congressman Gallego. We talked about him earlier. He's doing a radio interview just across us here, and very supportive of Indian country. So again, let's get out there and vote and do what we can for our people. That's what it's all about.
All right. Well, with that, we are going to have to wrap up the show. We will be doing a special broadcast this evening from the convention floor. We're going to cover some of the key speeches. We're going to watch some of the concerts and everything. So this has just been a wonderful week so far, but it's not over. We've still got more broadcasting to do later today. And, of course, we're going to broadcast again tomorrow from Chicago, Illinois. So we encourage our listeners to continue to listen and engage with us here. The conversation doesn't have to end just because we have to go off the air. You can connect with us on Facebook. You can connect with us on Instagram. You can go to our website, nativeamericacalling.com. And with that, I want to give a big thanks to all of our guests who joined us today. Shoreline Mayor Chris Roberts, Pima County Recorder Gabriella Cázares-Kelly, Action Indian Community Chairman Robert Miguel, former U.S. Representative Xochitl Torres-Small, and of course, our political correspondent, Sean Griswold. And please join us again tomorrow when we hear about Hugo Morales, the founder of the largest Latino public radio network in the country. Until then, I'm Sean Spruce. Stay safe, stay proud, and always stay sovereign.